Hi, my name is Dominic Rico, and this is my midterm exam for Education 201. For my exam, I've chosen to discuss a court case that I think is one of the most influential on the American education system, Plyler versus Doe. I've decided to focus on this case for three main reasons. First, the current presidential administration has a heavy focus on all things related to immigration. Although I haven't heard Trump mention education for illegal immigrants specifically, I have heard that children are at risk of being removed from schools because of their immigration status. Second, most American citizens aren't even aware of this case or its impact on our education system or economy. Third, there is an enormous human dimension to this court case. For the most part, prior to this administration, undocumented immigrants felt relatively safe or free in our country. This meant that children grew up to become adults here. It is in America's best interest that those adults are educated. Children, regardless of their documentation status, have the human right to education. America's southern border is where the majority of immigrants migrate from. Texas shares the largest US-Mexico border with over 1,200 shared border miles. This means that Texas has always had a significantly large Mexican population and many Mexican American families. Many of these, of course, are documented. The Texas school districts typically have had to absorb these children in higher proportions than the rest of our country. In addition to Mexican immigrants, many people from other Latin American countries also end up living in Texas. So, given all this, it is not a surprise that a border state such as Texas was where a case about undocumented immigrant children seeking education originated. The Supreme Court case Plyler versus Doe was triggered by a series of laws in Texas, beginning in about 1975. These laws began when the state of Texas allowed school districts the option to deny enrollment to any student who could not prove he was in the country legally. In some school districts, students or their parents were required to provide actual documentation that they were in the country legally. A few years A few years later, Tyler's school district decided to allow undocumented children to attend but charge them $1,000 tuition for each child each year. The superintendent of that school district was named James Plyler, which is who is named in the court case. The Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund, which is a legal counsel similar to the NAACP, agreed to represent four families from the Tyler School District who had undocumented children and were impacted by the $1,000 tuition requirement. They brought a class action suit against the district. This was a big challenge to the established system in Texas, but it turned out to be a successful battle because the federal district court for Texas ruled in favor of the families and against laws and requirements that had recently been passed. Unfortunately, shortly after the ruling, the Tyler School District issued an appeal to the U.S. Court of Appeals. After this court affirmed the lower court's decision, the Tyler School District and state of Texas appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. In 1982, the Supreme Court of the United States had to rule on whether or not the Texas law, which allowed school districts to deny free public education to undocumented children, violated the 14th Amendment by denying the Equal Protection Clause. The judges were almost split in their decision, 5-4, but the court ruled in favor of striking down the Texas law, making it unconstitutional. The court found that states cannot provide free public education to lawful citizens and documented immigrants and not provide it to students who may be here undocumented. The school district also failed to provide a rational reason for denying the education other than the immigration status. The Supreme Court ruling has held for decades, but has been challenged many times. California, Illinois, and Alabama have all had major cases trying to circumvent the ruling from 1982. Issues since then have dealt with reporting immigration status to the Federal Immigration Authority, expired visas, and collecting and reporting personal immigrant data in annual reports to the Board of Education. With the current feeling of anti-immigration, our country may see even more of these cases in the next few years. The consequences of trying to circumvent the ruling or differentiating between documented and undocumented children can be devastating for families and our country. Families may be more unlikely to enroll their undocumented children into schools or keep them home more often. Suspicion rises, so there becomes less trust of teachers, administrators, and other important education staff. If children aren't educated, they will be much less likely to become productive citizens as adults that boost our economy. And prejudice between children, adults, and families will increase, potentially causing violence and certainly harm to self-esteem and worth. The Plyler versus Doe Supreme Court ruling not only impacts our education system, but our country as a whole. In addition to future economic benefits of educated adults, crime rates could be lower, communities would be stronger, and children who were brought to the US by no choice of their own will have equal opportunities and human rights that they deserve. Justice William Brennan wrote the majority opinion in Plyler versus Doe. Even though education isn't a fundamental right for undocumented immigrant children under the Constitution, denying education violated the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause because it created a lifelong disadvantage for the children, essentially creating a subclass of illiterates. His closing remarks: by denying these children a basic education, we deny them the ability to live within the structure of our civic institutions and foreclose any realistic possibility that they will contribute in even the smallest way to the progress of our nation. Although the ruling states that educating undocumented children isn't a constitutional right, I do believe it is a human right and one that our country can't forget. For more information, you can visit these resources, which help me understand the ruling better and provided content for this presentation. Thank you.